in domestic violence or rape crisis, and had such a wealth of knowledge of everything that was happening in the community, the really important issues that need to be taken to Montpelier or to the city council or to the federal government. And when it came time that you asked, how many of you would run for office, and I sort of shyly raised my hand and thought, I'm already the politician, I'm the student body president, it really hit me. It was very surprising to me that so many of those other young women said, I don't feel compatible with politics. I feel like I would have to leave my womanhood at the door before I entered the halls of power. And that's not something I'm prepared to do. And it was deeply saddening to me to hear that from my peers. And I had the example of another woman you've certainly inspired, Rachel Weston, who's 28, who graduated from the Masters of Public Administration program and served as the state representative for 2 years down the hill in the Burlington section by the waterfront before encouraging me to run. And just having that example and having her there was really powerful in general. And when I come back and do talks like this with you or just come back and talk to students, I hear young women say, well, I still may not want to go into politics, I'm not sure, but now I know I can. I have your example, I have Rachel's example, I have women like Governor Kunin coming back and making me feel like I can do this if I want to. It is an option for me, whereas many of us didn't feel that way, and I'm sure in your generation, you really led the way. So it's making young women feel like they can do it, and I'm glad
you are a powerful role model for them, for your peers. And that's how people can imagine themselves doing things when they see somebody else doing them. Let me just ask you one more question, and that is, what's your impression of it after your first session in the legislature? For those of you who are not from Vermont, it was kind of a rough and tumble legislative session where the legislature, where the Republican governor vetoed the budget, and the legislature just 3 days ago overrode his veto. So was it what you expected, or how was it? I suppose you could never expect all this, but what do you think?
Well, I had been told by a lot of my mentors entering the building, a lot of mentors from here in Burlington as far as the other reps are concerned, to expect the unexpected. So at least I knew that coming in. But a lot of legislators are saying to me, boy, your next few years are going to seem really boring compared to this, because we made some pretty historic decisions given the really difficult economic times we're in, and also given our move to make history really and take on the issue of same-sex marriage and do it as a legislature before any other state had done so. I found when I was coming into the position, I wasn't quite sure if being a woman, being the one of 2 women under 40 and the only person of color in the House would make too much of a difference. I felt like I had a really different voice to put forth. But I found that there were some examples I'm really proud of for where I spoke up on an issue that I don't think perhaps others might have had the same perspective on or might have spoken up about. And there are 2 examples that I'm most proud of. One was being approached by the UVM Women's Center and a group of women who have just moved here from the Democratic Republic of Congo. These women who have just moved here from the Congo are coming from an environment where there's been a long-standing civil war, and they're facing a lot of sexual violence. The violence isn't just what you might expect in a I don't know if there's such thing as a normal civil war, but it's not male-on-male combat, or it's not just burning villages. It's really very targeted sexual violence, and it's really ripping the country apart. So they formed a new group in the state and asked me to put forth a resolution in the legislature to not only recognize their organization, but ask the legislature to call on Congress to support the International Violence Against Women Act and subsequently provide resources for the Democratic Republic of Congo to stop what's happening there. And a lot of them said they would have never thought to work with a legislator. They would have been intimidated by that idea, but first of all, having a young woman who was full of energy and not willing to let them feel intimidated, but trying to be very comforting, I think was very important to them. And having a father who immigrated to the United States from India and knowing what it's like for people coming to the country as new Americans, I think that really put them at ease and made them feel instantly like I understood a little bit more about their experience. So we were able to introduce that legislation, and I gave a speech on the floor saying what a journey it was for me to learn from them, from their experience, from the horrific things they've been through, and their ability to stand up and to remain strong and to speak up here in the United States, even though they're facing so many difficult situations still. We got the resolution passed unanimously, and they received a standing ovation from the body. And they were so moved to have that kind of recognition from our state legislature and to feel heard and seen as their community grows here in the state. And that was incredibly, incredibly important for me. And the other was the unique perspective I brought to the same-sex marriage debate. A lot of legislators either weren't aware when we entered the debate or had forgotten that it was only, I guess, 30 years ago now that the Loving decision was made by the Supreme Court that allowed interracial couples to get married in all states. And my parents were married only a decade after the Loving decision, and I'm the product of an interracial marriage. So being able to share that in our local newspapers, in the newspapers statewide, and to the rest of the body, that it's a civil rights issue and that I can understand very deeply that kind of civil rights issue, also reminding them that when our own president was born, his parents wouldn't have been allowed to marry in 17 states, I think was a unique perspective to bring to the table based on my identity. So, you know, it's a little bit of what I've accomplished that comes more from what I think is my understanding of the world as a woman and as a woman of color. And it's just been an incredible historic session anyway. And I think the legislature, this is partisan, but I think the legislature truly did do the right thing by putting together a responsible and fair budget at the end of the year and standing up to the governor who it appears to me didn't want to share the burden more equally, that it was really going to fall on the backs of people who were already seeing a lot of their services lost and really couldn't afford to see any more loss of services, whether they be medical or assistance with fuel or food and things like that. So we really tried to lessen the pain of this economic burden on our citizens.
Well, that's great, Kesha, that's great. Well, you no doubt do bring a different perspective. And you know, I think people learn from other people's stories. You know, when you make decisions in other areas of life as managers or whatever, you read reports, you look at statistics, but in the political process, it's often people's personal stories. And I remember when when civil unions was passed 10 years ago, the fact that there was an openly gay legislator actually turned who spoke on the bill. Suddenly people said, you know, gay and lesbian people aren't just out there somewhere, they're here. They're sometimes our children, sometimes our co-workers, sometimes our friends, and that changed the debate. And it's actually amazing how quickly the whole gay and lesbian issue has moved from being a very radical, depending on which part of the country you're in still, but being a very radical issue to being much more mainstream. And of course several states, Maine, New Hampshire, and Iowa, have now got, Iowa by a Supreme Court decision, the other states by the legislature have signed this bill into law. Well, no, as I said earlier, the United States does not do well compared to other countries. And let me just give you my one PowerPoint. I might try another PowerPoint, but we'll see. You have to pay close attention. This is a list. 100 and I forgot how many countries, 154 countries. And they're ranked in order of the percentage of women in the lower houses of parliament. The United States is down here. We rank 71st.